is with the U.S. mission in Africa. I met Joseph in January when the U.S. mission invited me there to work with reporters there and with Joseph's team on mobile and social reporting. And Joseph did an excellent presentation there, and I was really glad that he would be able to come back here and talk to us about the very importance of mobile in Africa, mobile in Nigeria, which he's most familiar with, but also I think we can sort of make the extension of mobile in developing countries. It's not all smartphones. So, Joseph, thank you, and away you go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Coming from Nigeria, it's a long way from home. I should start that way. I'm supposed to use one of the microphones. Hello, can you hear me? Good. So let's get started. I want to tell you about mobile in Africa, the growth. I want to share with you some data and statistics about growth of mobile in Africa. I'll talk about the innovation, things that people are doing, and great innovations are actually coming out of mobile technology in Africa. Particular focus will be on Nigeria, which is where I come from. I usually say my great country, Nigeria. And I'll tell you about the challenges and the opportunities that are available, and how probably if you look at the opportunities, you then know how you can be a part of the good things that's happening. Now that's me. I already introduced myself. Where I'm coming from is warm. I woke up yesterday and I looked at, I checked the weather and I saw 0. That's 32 for you if you think in Fahrenheit like you think. We think in centigrade or Celsius. I looked at 0 and I woke up this morning again, I looked at it and it was -1. And I wanted to call Prof and say, can we move the conference to the hotel so that we can just stay in my room? Because I'm sure if the room service come into my room, they'll be wondering who's living in here. Because the temperature, I turned everything down, is the least that you can get. I mean, the highest you can get. I wish it can go lower than that. My room is warm. I try to make it like where I'm coming from. Well, so that I don't adjust, because I'll be going back very soon, next week. So, what do I do in Nigeria? I work with different organizations, technology. I work with the US government, but I get the opportunity to talk to different organizations about how they can use technology, how they can implement technology in what they do. I talk a lot about social media, which is part of my core work in the mission, because I represent or I manage every internet-related, public-related face for the mission in Nigeria. So the website, social media, and then we do a lot of technology talks here and there. That's how I've been doing. I've been there for about 4 years. Before then, I was a core developer with a national oil company in the country in Nigeria. We call it the NNPC, Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation, where I work with open source technology and a little bit of proprietary technology, SharePoint, building web parts and things like that. So I really came from a core tech background. Now to include media into it, it's been fun. I live in Abuja, the capital city of Nigeria. Quite a number of people there. The population is over 2 million, thanks to the growth that came from the troubled states in the north, where people now move down south a little bit. So we have a lot of people coming into Abuja, or have moved into Abuja. And well, Abuja is a city of government, so you expect people there to be literate. Yes, they are. Using technology, yes, they do. Using mobile phones, yes, we do. And we do that a lot. Mobile phones are things that people pride in, so you see a lot of people carrying their mobile phones around and holding it in their hands, not just putting it in their pocket, particularly if you have a good one. You know what I mean? So the land space is big, but the population density is high. like I already said. We use a lot of technology. But if you're talking about technology in Nigeria, you would want to talk about Lagos, which is a commercial city. It's where most of tech events, the innovation centers, and the tech growth really takes place there. There's a place in Lagos called Yaba, which we refer to now, many people refer to, is just coming up really well as the Silicon Valley of Nigeria, because every technology company kind of look at setting up in Yaba. So many events happen around there. The tech hubs are really there, where a lot of innovation takes place. And many of the startups that I'll talk to you about today, many of them are actually in Yaba in Lagos. There is a tech hub in Abuja where I stay, but much of the talk happens in Lagos, in the capital city there. With about 17 million people in Lagos, you will know that it's a highly populated area with so many people. There is a lot of gap, not too much gap, but there is gap when it comes to literacy level in the south than in the north. You have more educated people, more people who are exposed and willing to take on education and technology in the southern part than in the northern part. And so you understand why Lagos will have a lot more technology there. But going back a little bit, before we start talking tech and mobile and all that, Africa was always referred to as a dark continent. Media reports were more of the bad things that are happening and how infrastructure was not working and how electricity down, clean water hard to find, illiteracy very high, infrastructure failing. I remember back in 1999, 2000, there was no GSM technology. There was really no mobile phones. We had analog cell phones, which to own one, you have to be rich. And anybody who had an analog cell phone will really flaunt it, you know. And it starts with 090, so we used to call it not 9 not. Just making fun. But over time, things began to change. And what brought about the change? What inspired much of the innovation in Africa is mobile. Mobile is lighting up Africa in so many ways. Mainly because it's the technology that is available. It's available to everyone. It's a game changer in Africa. You cannot talk about mobile, or you cannot talk about technology in Africa without really talking about mobile. And most of the innovations are around mobile devices, around wireless network and wireless internet, in so many ways. Now, Africa is quickly becoming a mobile connected continent. There are more cell phones in some places than you have access to electricity, really. And more cell phones than you have access to clean water in some countries. Well, not really in Nigeria, but in some of the African countries, that is very true. So where does it stand? I came up with notes because I want to give you quite some statistics, which I don't see any reason putting it all in my head. So I'll just look at the notes and tell you some of the statistics that exist right now. Half of Africa's population are now mobile. That's half of the 1.1 billion people, over 1.1 billion people that live in Africa. In Nigeria, there are about a little over 80 million, 180 million people. And mobile penetration is high. I'll give you the figures in a slide that will come up very soon. But not just about phones now. It's now no phone to mobile phone. Let me explain that. No phone to mobile phone is this simple. Here, when you started off with telephones and technology, you had analog phones, you had landlines, right? Am I correct? And then you move to mobile phones that were analog. And then you move to CDMAs. And then you move to GSM. And then you have the 2G, the 3G, the 4G, and all of them going, correct? But there was landline. Landlines were not very common. And even till today, it's very little. About over 100,000 lines are active of the millions that are active lines when it comes to mobile. So we jumped from no phone, almost literally, no phone, to the digital technology of the mobile phones and the handhelds that you have in everybody's hand. So we've all gone mobile. Everybody is talking mobile. 67% in penetration. That's the mobile penetration in Africa, 67%. So a lot more than half, like I said before. And 40% of the population in Africa are under 15. In countries like Uganda, about 50% of the population are under 15. So it's a country where you have a lot of young people, all right? And following the talk about millennia yesterday, you know that young people are the ones that are really pushing the technology of today. But the use of mobile phone is not just about having handhelds and using mobile phones. It's also about internet. There is a lot of use of the internet on their mobile devices because that is the device you have that can connect to the internet. There are computers, laptops, but it's not as common as when you have everybody carrying a mobile phone around. In Nigeria, 76% of internet traffic is from mobile devices. 76%. Mobile is not just a trend, it's a fast adoption of disruptive technology that is happening all around Africa. Facebook usage in Nigeria is about 15 million people right now on Facebook, active users on Facebook. And guess what? 100% of this 15 million use Facebook on their mobile phones. I have met people in talks where they've never seen their Facebook page or their Facebook profile on a computer. And they're very active. I actually had someone who was close to me were having a discussion once. A small group of people I was talking to about social media. And I was talking about the look of how to do something, the timeline, how to work with it on your computer. And I asked a question, and I pointed to her and asked the question, and she looked at me blank. I know she's very active on Facebook because she's my friend on Facebook. And she looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, you're active on Facebook. You should know how to do this. And she said, no. I said, so how do you do all that everyday posting of your photo on Facebook? Because anytime you dress up, you pick up your phone and take a selfie, and it goes online for your friends to see. You're about to eat, you snap and put it on Facebook for everybody to see. So how do you do all that? She said on her BlackBerry. And she showed me what she had, a BlackBerry. Now, smartphone penetration in Africa, in Nigeria particularly, is just about 30%. So when you talk about cell phones, you're really going to be thinking about feature phones, versus the smartphones. Why smartphone not the penetration not so much? It's not because people are not interested in owning smartphones. The difference between here and there is you can easily just get an iPhone, correct? Correct? Good. You can easily get an iPhone. You have contract lines. We don't really have contract lines. There are contract lines that exist, but they are not the type that you get a phone along with a contract, and as you're going on and paying every month, you're also paying for your phone. So you can get an iPhone for about $200. Am I correct? There we have to buy it outrightly. You pay everything. It's unlocked lines, unlocked phones that you get. So if you're going to pay almost 200,000 naira, which is about $1,000 for a phone, you would think twice about getting it. You'd rather go for something like this. If you look at this, you would think it's a Samsung Note, but this is not Samsung Note. This is Infinix. Chinese phones are really, really doing very well in Africa because they come cheap and they work well. This is an Android device, and it does almost everything. It does everything actually an Android device should do. It's 2 gig RAM, a 16 gig memory. You can have up to 32 gig, and you can put up to 64 to 128 memory card into it. So it does everything about the same. And this is just about $100. Paying everything for it. You're not owing anybody, and you're not paying any contract on it. So you see that the adoption of smartphones is because of the cheap phones that are now coming into the market. And smartphone makers have a good market in Africa, where you have only 30% of the 1.1 billion using smartphones. So you see so much of the cheap phones are really opening up their market there. So mobile is not just a trend anymore. It's something that everybody is picking up. Now let's look at a little bit of statistics. I thought that this would be a bit big so that we can see some of the stats, but I'll just read some to you. Of course, you know the size of Africa. You know the number of people that are in Africa. There are about 650 million cell phone subscribers in Africa. As of 2015, that is right now, in this year, we have 313 million in internet. That's the number of internet users that we have. That represents about 9.6% of the world users of the internet. Now, when you come to Facebook, there are about 120 million. 50 million of those are in Nigeria. And then you have the mobile broadband there. Broadband is one of the issues. And when I talk about the challenges, I'll talk a little bit about broadband penetration and how the issues that we've been having with broadband and some of the solutions that are being procured by the government. But coming back home to my country, my great country, Nigeria, we have about 180 million people. Voice subscription has reached 139 million people. So the teledensity this is 2014, the teledensity is 95.2%. Right now, as at August this year, it has gone over 100% teledensity. Now that is voice subscription, okay? Not smartphone users. Those are people who are using cell phones. And I told you that smartphone penetration is about 30%. So if you're thinking of reaching people on their mobile devices, you have to think beyond apps and internet. You have to think about SMS. You have to think about USSD. You have to think about using bulk web to SMS, that's bulk SMS. And you have to think of two-way communication when it comes to SMS applications. Using short codes and things like that. They are what is really, they are the kind of technology, the kind of application of mobile that is able to reach the rural communities. And people are using that. I'll give you examples very soon. I already told you that Facebook usage in Nigeria is 100% mobile. Now, how do people in Africa use their cell phones? That's a chart that shows you a little bit. It's from Pew Research Center. Text messaging is 80%. So almost everybody on their smartphones use text message, use SMS. If I get a message on my phone, the value of an SMS, the value attached to an SMS is much more than the value I add to any other alert. And that's how it goes there. So when you want to get people's attention, really, you use SMS. Politicians, when they do their campaigns, there's a lot of SMS that go around. There's a lot of junk SMS that you get when it comes to marketing in Nigeria on the mobile. Sometimes I used to wonder, is there any way to set your phone so that you can get spam SMS going to a separate box so you don't have to open them? People take a lot of photos on their mobile phones, and mobile money has really taken grounds in Africa, particularly in Kenya. It's still young, not very young, but the adoption in Nigeria is not as high as Kenya and Uganda and some other African countries. But mobile money is one of the ways that mobile has revolutionized Africa, because there are places where people don't have bank accounts. They don't have access to the bank. But with mobile money, people are able to now use these features or these services on their phones, and they're able to keep their money. News, which is where many of the people here come in, media. A lot of people access news on their phones. Can I remember the last time I purchased a newspaper? No. Can I ever remember purchasing anyone at any time? I don't think so. But I get the news every day. The same with everybody around me. People use their smartphones to get news. They go to newspaper sites. Even though some of them are not mobile friendly, that's what people still use. And social media, that is the primary way a lot of people get news. So you get the rumors from social media, from your colleagues, your friends, who are your contacts, your network on social media, and then you confirm that when the media houses send out their own messages. I met a group of friends. I talked to a lot of people about social media, and I met a group of friends once when we went for an event in Lagos. I think that was Social Media Week. Was it this year or last year? But while we're there, we're just talking before a session, and somebody said, there was a news that came out about a politician the previous day. So somebody said, wow, after we had finished discussing this, we have finished sharing this news about this politician, and we're done with it and moved on to the next thing, that's when the media houses now published it. That's the power of social media. So a lot of things that are coming out from the traditional media, they're already things that people have discussed and they've put behind them. And so the traditional media are really getting their hands dirty with social media and using mobile technology. They're really getting involved with the whole thing so that they can be in the forefront. So you see a lot of newspaper houses that are actively growing their base on platforms like Twitter, like Facebook, mainly Twitter. Twitter adoption is very high now. So let's move on. The impact. Now let's get to some of the interesting things, which to me, these are more of the interesting things. The impact of mobile media in Africa. There's so many things that I would say that what you can do with technology is limitless. It's just how much you can think. If you can think about it, then you can actually do something with it. It may not be immediate, but you can do something. And so people seeing the opportunities that mobile has brought are really taking advantage of that to do awesome things in different fields, in health, in entrepreneurship, in banking. I already said something a little bit about that, in governance, in politics. People are taking advantage of all this. In media, radio is still the number one way, or most people still use radio, and it still has the highest number of audience when it comes to media. But do you know what? Over 40% of people, of mobile phone users, use their phones to listen to radio. So it means cell phones are actually, but the cell phone penetration is actually more than radio, because if you think about it, radio, they're talking about the potential reach, the coverage they have. While cell phones are talking about people who have the phones right there in their hands. And when people have it, like we're always told, it's with you everywhere you go. And let's look at this a little bit. Health. How is mobile technology affecting? What are innovations that are being done in health? In Africa, in Nigeria, access to healthcare can be limited, particularly in the rural areas where we don't have doctors on ground and health practitioners are very few compared to the number of people that are there. So people are taking advantage of mobile to reach to more people with the little expertise that is available. From disease spread, how do you use that? How do you use technology to address that? With mobile now, with the 650 million people who are using their mobile phones, they can at least do SMS. They're able to track who's dying somewhere, who's sick, clusters of disease somewhere. Before an epidemic really spread and disease really spread, people are able to early response is really supported with mobile technology. So surveillance also of disease and spread of disease. Now, there are 3.2 billion people at risk of malaria in the world, and 90% of those come from Africa. Malaria also, which is a very serious problem in Africa, costs about 12 billion when it comes to lost resources, lost work, manpower. Malaria is one of the diseases that really stop people from going to work. It's said that about 10 million days of lost school, 10 million lost school days every year in Africa due to malaria. Children can't go to school. So some people call themselves Malaria No More. Is a group of people who are really using technology to address malaria, and they're looking for how they're working on mobile in addressing the issues of malaria. They have three approaches that they use, and I'd like to talk about their approaches first. Early diagnosis, insecticide-treated nets, and vaccine development. Now, when it comes to early diagnosis, Malaria No More came up with an innovation where they have very simple devices that can be used to diagnose malaria. The devices are very cheap, and their success rate in diagnosing this illness is about 99%. Now, they distributed these devices to people, and with their phones, they're able to communicate. I may not be a doctor, but with the device, I can check someone to know if the person has malaria, and then you send that over your mobile phone to the health practitioners, who can then recommend something and the treatment that is necessary. And then the second approach, which is the net, insecticide-treated net, it goes around. Now, the problem with net is people sometimes don't like to use nets. Other people kind of forget to use the net. You come home and you just blank out. You slip off somewhere and you don't take that time to fix the net and slip in. So reminders are something that is good for encouraging the use of nets, insecticide-treated nets. Now, with radio, how many people are actually sitting by their radio before they go to bed? How many people really listen when you broadcast that message? But with SMS, most people sleep by their phones. They wake up and the first thing they look at is their phone. So Malaria No More now uses SMS to remind people and using nets, and the success rate has really gone up. And of course, Malaria No More encourages a lot of development when it comes to the vaccine. Then, when it comes to drug supply, they also, one of the issues with drug supply is when stock keeping, when you have places in the rural area that are not easily reached. Let me stand here because of the mic. When you have places in the rural area that are not easily reached, and the stock goes down, it takes some time for them to be able to communicate to the center. And sometimes people are just not very effective with what they do. So they're not reporting early that the supplies are low. So what this group did is to give out mobile phones to people in various rural areas, and then they have district centers that supply the drugs. So every week, once in a week, say on Thursdays, somebody in the district center sends out SMS blasts to everybody in the rural areas, the rural health centers, asking about the level of their supplies. Then they respond. The response is now taken and put into a system where you can tell, it's like stock and inventory. You can tell which areas need supplies and when to send in the supplies. So before they actually get exhausted, they have new supplies. In that way, they always keep stock. They always have stock of the necessary vaccines, and I'm not just talking about malaria now. I'm talking about other vaccines that are necessary for health. Then counterfeit drugs. This is a system that is currently working in Nigeria, in Ghana, and I think in Kenya also, where people companies put scratch codes, security codes behind drug so that people can scratch. And when you scratch, a code is revealed to you. You SMS that code to a particular number, mostly short codes that is provided on the same drug sachet, and a response comes back to you telling you if that drug in your hand or that medication in your hand is genuine or fake. In that way, we're able to eliminate part of the 30% of fake drugs that are in the market. Okay, let me put it in a correct way. 30% of the drugs that are in the market are fake. And this system is used to fight that, mobile. Then health education. Health education really comes more from social media, and most people use 100% use Facebook on their mobile phones, and Twitter, of course, on their mobile phones. So when it comes to health education, people encourage and send health tips via mobile devices. That has a lot to do with networks. When you have your peers telling you the tips, telling you how to live healthy, then that peer pressure comes in. So people really take advantage of that to encourage health. I'll give you two examples of systems that are currently on ground that are encouraging mobile health in using mobile technology to talk about health. Praket Foundation, this is in South Africa. They have a system called Moms Connect where they send out tips. Have you ever heard of Baby Center? Baby Center, I think, is all over the world. Now, Mom Connect is very similar to that. Health tips and for mothers, having your regular schedules, going to antenatal and all that. They use SMS to remind mothers to send out tips, and a lot of people registered on the platform in South Africa, and it's now spreading to other African countries. In Nigeria, Wella Health was started by a young Nigerian doctor who used to live in Europe, and then he was practicing in Europe. He had a lot of experience with chronic diseases. So with his success there, he decided to come back. He's a very young man. He decided to come back to Nigeria and establish Wella Health for the management of chronic diseases. According to him, many people don't really keep their health records. So his system stores health records so that it's available to you everywhere. His system also connects you with doctors. So it's more of like a directory of doctors with their specialty. So if you have a kind of disease, you can know which doctors you can attend to and which doctors can attend to you. And with your health records right there with you anytime, if you need medical attention, it's something that can easily be accessed. All right. They also have a directory list of many other health providers, not just doctors, pharmacies, and groups like that. Then let's move a little bit further to education. Now, this aspect is of great interest to me because I'm interested in education. I'm not really into the practice of teaching and all that, but I like it. And when I see the level of education in Nigeria, which is still on the low side, there are resources that we can take advantage of, and mobile is something that is of great use to us. I do talks about open educational resources. I do talks about MOOCs and OCW, that's OpenCourseware. When I saw the opportunities there, I really felt that it's something that we can take advantage of. Before I came, about a week ago, I was in a school to tell the teachers, it's a secondary school, okay, what you call K-12, we call it, that's a secondary level. I was in the school to tell them about how they can take advantage of open educational resources to help their students learn better. And it's really broad. If you talk about open educational resources, a good example of the possibilities of open educational resources is the Sailor Academy. I don't know if you've heard about the Sailor Academy. It's from the US here, where they took advantage of the resources that are available on open educational resources, got experts to vet these resources, and they are able to actually form or have a university online with all the courses, computer science, management, everything that you would think of in a standard university. But the resources came from free and available resources online that are free to use, reuse, modify, and you know what open educational resources are. So in education, knowledge is power. So when people have access to these resources, they are able to do more, and people are doing more. I once read about someone who has taken over 250 MOOC courses. He's in Port Harcourt in Nigeria. And that has really given him a lot of advantage. For me, a lot of things I have learned, a lot of things I do, even with technology, is not exactly what I was taught in school. I came from a computer science major, but not to make fun of my school in any way or my education in any way, but what I use is what I learned on my own. The development I do and most of everything I do is actually what I learned on my own, what I sat in front of the computer to read. I read a lot of ebooks. I read cover to cover a lot of books that helped me know how to program, how to build apps, and even though I have a computer science background. Examples of startups that are using mobile for education. One of them from Nigeria is called Efiko. Efiko, because of the failure rate in Nigeria, the two startups I'm going to talk about have to do with exam practice tests and tips that will help you do better in your exam, because the failure rate is very, very high. So these two platforms actually help that. Efiko would give you practice tests. When you sign up, you get practice tests to take in various fields, from secondary level to professional. And when you take the test, you send a code to them. They send you questions, correct? And then you take the exams. Then they give you tips about the answers you have provided, where you missed it, and how you can learn further. The same with ENISA. ENISA is in Kenya, and they have really gone a lot further in this. ENISA would actually send you when you sign up, they send you 5 questions. You take the 5 questions, and from there, you begin to get tips on how to do better in your exams. And many students testify that their use of these systems have actually improved them. For ENISA, I won't take the time to tell you all the statistics of their reach and their success in Kenya, but they're really doing quite well with that. So with MOOCs, people are able to sign up for MOOCs in the mission. We do what we call facilitated or in-person MOOCs, like some people call it, facilitated sessions in MOOCs. The first I did was last year, when we used Knight Foundation's, what do you call it now? Investigative journalism class. We set up a class where we had journalists come to take the investigative journalism class from Knight Foundation. And the success was very good. By the time, what we do is this: you go home, we get you signed up for the course. Of course, you can sign up by yourself, but we show you how to go about it. And then we had iPads and internet connection freely available for the registered participants when they come in to sit down and take the classes. And then when they take the classes, we have a discussion around what we have learned. So people go back, and every week, once a week, we meet. So they go back home and use their own internet connection, and most of it is from the telecommunication companies. They use their internet connection to take the classes, and then we come back and bring it back home. Since it's US-based, since all the examples are from the US, we now talk about how does this relate to Nigeria, and how can you do this. I heard a lot of stories from many of the journalists of their adventure in investigative journalism. It was really exciting to listen to some of them. Nigerian journalists are very daring. Then in banking, I already said that many people don't have access to the traditional banks. So mobile money is really gaining ground in Africa. 3/4 of the world's people of the people in poor countries are unbanked. Say it's World Bank. Money transfer and on mobile phones is what is really increasing. I have some apps here for my bank that I can take advantage of. I know you use that here because those are apps. But beyond that, SMS is really used. A good example is M-Pesa. M-Pesa is from Kenya also. M-Pesa has really gained ground in Kenya. About 67% of people in the rural areas use that. So people who don't have access to banks really, they take advantage of that. And then they can they can receive payment via their mobile phones, and they can make payments via mobile phones. The beauty of it is how other people are using these platforms as the foundation for their own ideas. For instance, somebody uses M-Pesa to supply clean water to rural areas so people can easily pay using M-Pesa platform. Another person uses it for solar energy, off-grid power. Since electricity is really, really low, there is, I won't give you the name, but there is an organization, a young man, a startup in Kenya who sets up rural, solar panels on houses in rural areas, and they pay using M-Pesa. In Nigeria also, I know a young man called Shegun who is doing the same, but he's not taking payments via any mobile platform. He's actually got a grant from the US government when he became part of YALI. I don't know if you've heard about YALI. It's President Obama's initiative for young African leaders. And he's into green energy, clean energy. He's using solar. He's setting up solar panels on houses in rural areas and giving electricity to people who are off the grid and not on the grid. In Nigeria, Simple Pay is one of the mobile money platforms that is very common, or it's really taking ground now. Simple Pay is in Abuja. The startup started last year, 2014, but they've really gone further. They actually started in 2013, but didn't really take off until they got some money in 2014 to kick off. And with the money they got, they are really beginning to spread out. People use this to make payments. It's not as strong in Nigeria as in Kenya, but it's beginning to grow also in Nigeria. Now, mobile revolution has actually begun. It's not just in these areas I have talked about. In agriculture, in Kenya, many farmers get tips on their mobile phones, about market tips on their mobile phones. They get tips also about their crops and how they can improve their farming. But the major push there is the availability of or the marketing. What is needed, where you can supply your goods, your crops, and of course the tips are important also. In politics, of course, we know about many of the things that happened in Africa recently about politics, the uprising. Ushahidi is a very common platform in Kenya that it's mobile based. The beauty of Ushahidi is an open source platform that other innovation has actually come out of it. It's used for crisis management now, but it actually came out of election crisis when there was violence in Kenya because of the election, and that was set up to crowdsource where patches of violence and what is happening all around. Right now it's being used to manage crisis, and it's gone far. In Nigeria, there is Revoda. Revoda is by a group of young people in Lagos who started that, and they use it to crowdsource also information about elections. Revoda was used very well during the past election. The past election it ended very peaceful, and we Nigerians are very glad about that. Entrepreneurship. Many people have come up with different ideas when it comes to mobile. It has opened up a world of ideas, a world of opportunity to do things. And if you look at startups in Africa, in Nigeria particularly, you see that most of them have something to do with technology, with mobile. That's where they get information, that's where they send information out, that's where they reach to the audience that they need to reach. Now, let's talk about the challenges. Excuse me, I don't know how much time I have. Okay, let's talk about the challenges that are there. Number one challenge, infrastructure. Electricity. Electricity is one of the major challenges that exists in Nigeria when it comes to infrastructure, not just in Nigeria, but in Africa. So, clean energy. Clean energy is one of the things that is working very well. And when it comes to mobile, how do you address this? Some people have, let me put it this way, something that really sells now is anything that would help with power. For instance, have you heard of power banks? Maybe you don't call it power bank, but you see this small device that you can charge and it serves as like a second battery for you. Then when your phone runs out, you plug to it. That is selling very well in Nigeria. So people, you run out of power, you have something else to charge your phone. Most Nigerians have two smartphones or two cell phones. Sometimes one smart, the other not smart. Sometimes both of them are smart. I have two. And one of them, this one, uses two SIM cards. Why do we use so many lines? You would wonder. Well, one of the reasons is so that you can take advantage of the low rate, of course, on the different networks. But beyond that, that is not exactly the common reason anymore. That was the initial reason. Right now, some of the connection between networks is stronger. If I'm calling from the same network, my reception is better than crossing a lot of times. So people have more than one. And because some of the networks, their downtime is high, you want to be able to be available when one network is not working, people can reach you on the other one. So you see that a lot. And of course, the fun of carrying your smartphone around and flaunting it, you have internet connection on one and the other is not working. When there is an offer on one, you take advantage of that. Many of these lead to people having many phones. So power is very important. You need to have these devices charged. The other challenge that is there is is broadband. And let me talk a little bit about broadband. The broadband penetration in Nigeria is still about 6%, between 6 to 10% is on the low side. Fiber optics is not spreading very well because one of the first reasons is government policies. Government policies on the tariff, the amount of money you pay to lay 1 kilometer of fiber is very high. So these organizations are having difficulty laying their fiber cables, and there's a lot of pressure from groups to really bring down this cost for the organizations so that technology can really move further. But there is about 9 Mbps of data coming in. It has underwater cable has come into Lagos and has come into Port Harcourt, but to spread into the lands is what is still holding back that. So our bandwidth is very low. It's still, there is a broadband master plan that is on ground for about 2-3 years now, and the effort is to raise the bandwidth to about 1.5 Mbps. In other countries, you have up to 10, 7, and all that, but it's still on the low side. We're still working on bringing it up. Opportunities exist, of course, because of these challenges. So people can look into how they can push that and how they can make these services available. So right now, what people use mostly is wireless internet on their phones, wireless internet on modems, wireless internet on devices that you can get connected wirelessly. Then another challenge that is there, politics. Corruption is high. It still exists, not only in Nigeria, in other Africa. It exists all over the world, actually, but in Nigeria, is on the high side, to be mad about it. But there are a lot of groups that are using mobile technology to fight corruption. They are using that to fight human rights. Sometime last year, there were ideas of how to crowdsource on human rights. There are ideas on crowdsourcing information on corruption and exposing corruption using information that people can share on their mobile phones. Of course, you also use this to encourage people and to talk about corruption and all the illegal things that are happening. So Corruption, governance, politics are some of the challenges that exist with mobile penetration in Nigeria and in Africa. Another thing is education. Now, it's not that people don't like the devices and don't like mobile technology and using it. It's not that they don't want to accept it. It's just that many people don't know how to use it. Okay? So the young man in the urban area uses his cell phone differently from the way an old woman in the village would use it. Of course, when it comes to how people use cell phones and the adoption in the groups, the age groups, everybody actually uses it. My father, who is about nearly 75 years old right now, he has a tablet, he has a BlackBerry, he has about 2 cell phones along with his tablet. He's on the internet, he reads his news now on his tablet, which is something that he always used to send us to buy newspapers for him before. That has changed. So the challenges are there. Now, the opportunities, what are the opportunities that exist? And we're bringing this to a close, talking about the opportunities. Africa should no longer be seen just as a sport for natural resources, where you can get crude oil, you can get all the natural resources you can think about. And I think about my country, I think about so many natural resources that are available. Wow, you can name them from gold to ginseng to oil. It's not just the oil, to agriculture, to so many things that are there. And sometimes when you fix your eyes on one, it becomes a problem because you will not see the other things. But technology is it's growing in Africa. It's not just starting anymore. There is the full acceptance of it. And it's a big opportunity where people can take advantage of that. People can come up with innovative ideas to do things. In the area of power, I said that as one of the challenges. So let me tell you some of the things that are being done in that area to help. I know Microsoft for Africa is trying to take advantage of TV white spaces to improve the telecommunication reach in some of the African countries. They are not doing that in Nigeria yet. I know they exist. I met the head of Microsoft Africa some time ago and talked about it. They taking advantage of that. I learned that with that TV white space, they are able to reach further. A cell tower will be able to reach further, so you can have less cell towers. Right now, you have a cell tower, and the diameter of reach of a cell tower, the range is about 10 kilometers. So you have another one every 10, 20 kilometers, and then there is a competition of the different telcos who have their cell towers and are not really sharing. So you have so many cell towers coming up. But with such ideas, you'll be able to have less cell towers and reduce the cost of the infrastructure, and then people can have access to this technology even more. Power also affects cell towers. Since I talked about cell towers, let me say a little bit about that. Because there is no steady electricity, all the cell towers are powered by generators. Okay, so imagine the amount of diesel that goes into powering these cell towers that are about 10, 20 kilometers apart all over the country. So a lot of money, that's why the cost of telecommunication is a bit high when it comes to Nigeria. Most of us don't use contract lines. I think about 95% use pay-as-you-go. So we get to load our phones with credit and go on. That's why the idea of Apple selling very well here and not selling very well there is also there. Since we don't have contract lines, you can't go into a contract where you pay in bits for your phone. You just have to buy it outrightly, and you do pay as you go. The first time I came to Washington, D.C., I made a little bit of a shock. I'm sorry to say, but it's true. A little bit of a shock, because in Nigeria we have 4 telecommunication companies, GSM companies, not just telecommunication, but GSM companies, 4 of them, and they all provide you pay-as-you-go service with internet subscription, data subscription you can use. And I came to DC and I wanted to get a phone to use, a line to use, and I said, where are the GSM companies around? They told me there are 2. Am I correct? I'm sure you don't even know that many of the ones you look at, they are CDMAs, not GSM really. So there are two of them, and I went to the first one to get a line, pay-as-you-go line, because I was just going to be around for 3 weeks, pay-as-you-go line, and say I can only get a contract line that will give me a data plan. Oh, wow. I wanted to run back to Nigeria quickly. And then I went to the other one, but the other one gave me that. I think it was AT&T. And I thought that it was only in Nigeria you come to a place there will be no reception. I went into my hotel room in Hyatt on the 10th floor, and there was no reception in my room. It was a shock, because I thought, telecoms work very well in the US. Everywhere you go, you can hold a cell phone and have all the data you want. But the opportunities exist. The cell towers are there, the power, the opportunities in the field of power, low-cost alternative to power. I already talked about power banks. Smartphone makers, they have so much opportunity in Nigeria, in Africa, to sell phones. If iPhone want to do well in Nigeria, they have to think about how to do phones that are cheaper, but still as good. There's always a 10% that use iPhones. I used to have one. I now use an Android phone. So low prices are things that people can look at. Infinix, there's a phone maker company in Nigeria now called Solo. It's indigenous. They make the phones there, and they're really trying to push it. It's an Android device also. Android is really doing a lot with the cheap phones. Now, what works in here, I already told you that, like the iPhone case I just gave. What works here may not work in Africa. All right, it's not the same terrain, it's not the same way things work. Local ideas or local innovation will address local problems better. So I would think, and I think I'm right to say that the best way that the Western world can really take advantage of the market in Africa is to partner with the local innovators. If you can come up with ideas, if you can work with these innovators who are in the system and know the needs of the people, because those things also affect them. What's affecting the people also affect them. Then you'll be able to make good way with investing in Africa, and it's a good place to invest because the market is still very, 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 very new, very fresh, very open. The opportunities abound so much. Startup companies are springing up everywhere. The tech hubs are really encouraging that. And I think it's a good opportunity for people. For media, yes, you can take advantage of what's happening in Africa. Take advantage of mobile. Tailor your content to fit on mobile. If your website is not mobile friendly, you have cut off a lot of people because we'll be panning and trying to find where your content is. And we'll lose a lot. And if you cut off content from mobile, you have content on your full-blown website, your website on the desktop, on the computers, and it's different from what you have on your mobile, then you can be sure that you have cut off some people from some of the content on your website. Because so many of these people don't even look at your website on their computers, and they never will, at least not for a while. Okay, so talking about that, that's me. That's who I am, and this is Africa, truly mobile. Thank you. We take questions?
Okay, so the questions will be here in this room. It'll be the start of the next session. So each of our sessions now is roughly about 15 minutes late. So if you're looking at the schedule, everything is just sort of moved back 15 minutes. So we'll start the breakout sessions now in Regency A, B, and Heritage Room. We have Susan Polton, I believe, in Regency A, David Cohn in Regency B, C, and